The tide is out. In the quiet it leaves behind, old things surface, stories that only show themselves when the world goes still. This is low tide lore. Tonight, the old paths where the bells grew silent. Settle in and let the water stay low a while. I met him only once, high above a village whose name I no longer trust myself to spell correctly, at the place where the spruce give up and the grass takes over. He was sitting on a flat stone with his stick across his knees, watching mist move along the tree line the way water moves along a floor. He said, before I had asked him anything, that he could still hear a bell up there if the wind came from the right direction. There was no bell. There were no sheep. There was only the wind, moving low through grass gone silver at the tips, and somewhere far off, a lark going up and up on its own thin thread of sound. He told me his father had walked this same slope every spring since, before he could count the years, and his father before him, and that the road itself was older than any family that had ever used it. They called it simply the Road of the Sheep. No one had ever needed a better name for it. It began, he said, on St. George's Day, in the lowland village, with the animals still shaggy from winter, and the mud not yet dried out of the yards. The flocks were let out of the winter folds at first light, while the grass in the village gardens still held frost in its shadow side. He remembered the smell before he remembered anything else. Wet wool, wood smoke still in his coat from the house, and under it, faint, the sweetness of the first green shoots the sheep tore at along the ditches. The dogs went first, he said. Big, pale animals with spiked collars against the wolves, walking ahead with their heads low, as if they already knew the road better than the men did. He stopped talking there for a while, long enough that I thought he had finished. He was only listening to something in the grass I could not hear. The road climbed for 3 days, he said, sometimes 4 if the rivers were high. Through beech woods where the light came down in coins, then spruce, dark and cold, even at noon. Each flock had its own baci, its head shepherd, and each baci carried the year's whole arithmetic in his head. Whose ewes these were, whose lambs, whose debt of cheese was owed to whom by autumn. He said his own father wore the title for 11 years and never once wrote a number down. It was all kept in the bells. I asked him what he meant. He looked at me as if I had asked what he meant by breathing. Every animal of any size wore one, he said, and no 2 bells in a flock were tuned quite alike. A good shepherd knew each voice the way you know a person's voice through a wall. In full daylight, you could count the flock with your eyes. In the fog above the tree line, you counted with your ears instead. The mist up there did not lift and burn off the way it does lower down. It simply thinned, then thickened again, on no schedule a man could plan around. He said a shepherd learned to walk inside it the way you learn to walk inside a house at night, not by seeing the furniture, but by remembering where it stood. It was in that mist, he said, that the wolves came closest. Not often, not every year, but close enough that a man kept the count of his bells fresh in his mind at all times. They did not attack in the open, he told me. They waited for the fog to separate one bell from the others, waited the way water waits at the low point of a field. His father lost 2 lambs one spring to a single wolf that circled the flock for 2 nights before it took anything at all. He said his father spoke of that wolf for the rest of his life, as though it had been a difficult neighbor rather than an animal. The old man laughed, once low in his chest, and did not explain what was funny about it. I did not ask. Above the tree line, the ground opened out, he said, into grass that went on further than a boy's eyes could hold, broken only by gray outcrops and the low stone huts they called the stana. There the flocks from several villages met and mixed and were sorted again, and the real work of the summer began. The milking before light, the cheese pressed in cloth and hung to drip from the rafters. He said his hands still remembered the shape of it, the curd warm and giving under his palms, long after his hands had forgotten most other things they once knew how to do. At night, when the fires were lit low against the wind, the older men told the story of the shepherd and the lamb that could speak. Everyone up there knew it. No one ever tired of hearing it again. A ewe lamb warns her shepherd that the other 2 flocks mean to kill him before evening, for his sheep, his dogs, his good pastures. And the shepherd, hearing this, does not run. He only asks the lamb to tell his flock, if he dies, to bury him near the fold, close enough to hear the dogs still barking and the pipe still playing. The old man said his father sang that part slower than any other, every single time, as though the words needed the extra room to fit. I asked him if he believed it, the old story. He said belief was the wrong word for it. It was simply what the mountain sounded like, once you had lived on it long enough. He was quiet again after that, long enough for the lark to finish its climb and drop back down into the grass somewhere behind us. Summer up there, he said, had its own weather that owed nothing to the valley below. Sun in the morning, then by afternoon a wall of cloud coming over the ridge fast enough to outrun a running man. The bells changed pitch before a storm arrived, he told me. Not louder, just closer together, as the sheep drew in against each other without being told to. He remembered lightning striking a rock outcrop close enough that the whole flock startled as one animal, and how the baci counted bells for an hour afterward before he would let anyone eat. Bears came too, though more rarely than wolves, and were treated with a different kind of respect. A wolf you fought, a bear you simply gave room to, the way you give room to weather. He said his grandfather once stood very still for the length of a hymn while a bear crossed 30 paces from the fold, and afterward would not speak of it except to say the bear had looked tired. The summer, he said, was long in the living of it and short in the telling of it now. That was the strange arithmetic of being old. By late September, the grass up there began to go the color of old rope, and the baci would watch the sky for the first hard frost, the way a man watches for a letter he is expecting. The descent came around St. Demetrius's day in autumn, and he said it felt different from the climb in every way but the road itself. Fatter animals now, heavier with the summer's grass. Wheels of cheese wrapped in bark and cloth, carried down slung across the dog's own back sometimes, when there were more wheels than men. In the villages below, the return was its own small festival. Bells clattering down the last hill into a place that had been waiting for that exact sound since spring. Women came out with their aprons still on from whatever they had been doing, he said, because you did not finish a task once the bells were heard on the near ridge. You went. He smiled at that memory in a way he had not smiled at any of the others. It was, I think, the only one that still arrived whole. I asked him when it had started to end. He shrugged, the way men shrug when the true answer is a long list of small things rather than one large one. Roads came, he said. Not roads for sheep, roads for trucks, and it was faster and it was cheaper to move a flock in a trailer than to walk it for 4 days behind a boy with a stick. The young men went down to the towns for other work and did not come back up in spring the way their fathers had, and a baci's knowledge, all of it kept in his head and in the bells, had nowhere left to be handed to. Then came the papers, he said, the borders drawn around the high pastures, the grazing counted and permitted and taxed in ways his father would not have believed a mountain could be measured. None of it happened quickly. He said that was the strange part. If it had happened quickly, someone might have stopped to notice. He looked back up toward the treeline mist as he said this, and I understood he was not really speaking to me anymore. The last spring he went up, he said, there were 4 flocks where there had once been 11, and only 2 of the old bell makers left in the whole valley who still knew how to tune one by ear. He kept his own family's bell, he told me, the one his father had carried and his father before that. It hung now in a shed, on a nail, next to tools nobody used for anything anymore. I asked if he ever took it down. He said once a year, on St. George's Day, whether or not he walked anywhere at all. He would carry it out to the edge of his own small pasture, ring it once into the morning air, and stand there listening to it fade, the way you might listen for an answer you already knew was not coming. Then he would carry it back inside and hang it on its nail again, and that, he said, was the whole of his transhumance now. One bell, one field, one morning. We sat a long while after that without either of us speaking, and the wind moved the grass in long-combed waves down the slope below us, silver, then green, then silver again. Far off, the lark went up once more, small and certain against all that empty sky, and he watched it the way another man might watch a familiar door open. I have thought of that hillside many times since, the mist at the treeline thinning and thickening on no schedule, exactly as he described it, needing no sheep at all to move the way it moved. If I go back now, I expect the same stone will still be there, flat and gray, worn smooth on one side where a man once sat with a stick across his knees. And if the wind comes from the right direction, low across all that open grass, I think I would still listen for a bell. There would not be one. There is only the wind now, moving through the grass at the treeline, patient as it always was, long before there were any bells up there to answer it, and long after. The tide is turning now. What surfaced tonight will slip back under, the way these stories always do. But the water keeps them. It always carries them back. If you want to be here when it pulls away again, follow along, and the next one will find you. Until then, rest easy. The water remembers.